Ever notice how much we talk about man-children? Like it's become this cultural joke. But what if there's something deeper there, psychologically?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. And, it's something Carl Jung was already looking at way back in the early 1900s. He was really into these patterns of behavior he called archetypes.
Archetypes, huh? Could you break that down a bit?
Sure. Imagine them like blueprints for how we act almost. These patterns that show up across different cultures and times. One Jung talked about was the Puriturnus, the eternal child. This is about adults who, even though they're grown up, kind of stay stuck in adolescence mentally.
So it's not just a guy who likes video games, it's more like his whole mindset is lagging behind.
Exactly. It's about not wanting to really be an adult, with all the responsibility and stuff. They hold on to that youthful freedom, but it can really hold them back.
Okay, starting to see the man-child link now. But what does this actually look like day to day? How do we spot these eternal children?
Well, one of Jung's students, Marie-Louise von Franz, she studied this a lot. She pointed out some signs, like a big one is still depending on mom, even as an adult, and avoiding things that'll make him grow up, challenges and commitments.
This mother figure thing is interesting, but it doesn't mean every guy close to his mom is stuck like this, right?
No, not at all. It's more complicated than that. Think about it. In the old days, there were these rituals, rites of passage, to help boys become men. It was like a symbolic break from the mother, you pushing them towards independence.
Yeah, makes sense.
But nowadays, we don't really have those rituals.
So harder for guys to make that mental shift away from mom.
It is. And on top of that, fathers today, they don't always fill that role, that guiding into manhood thing either. They're busy or not around or whatever.
So you're saying this lack of clear steps and dad's not stepping up, maybe it's feeding this eternal child problem.
Could be. When there's no push to separate and no strong dad figure, it creates this gap. And that gap gets filled by staying attached to mom, which makes it hard to become a truly independent person.
Really starting to get how this all connects to the man-child idea. It's not just immaturity on the surface, it's deeper than that.
Exactly. And when you look at our culture, Western culture, you can see this pattern everywhere.
Can you give some examples? How does this actually play out in society?
Well, think about how many guys have commitment issues, right? Whether it's relationships, jobs, even just keeping promises, there's this need for instant gratification, always chasing the next fun thing instead of long-term goals.
I see that. It's like they're trying to hang on to that carefree, no consequences life you have when you're young, even when it doesn't work anymore.
Right. It shows up in different ways, like the guy who keeps switching jobs, never feeling settled, or the guy who avoids serious relationships, just wants casual stuff that's not too deep.
Almost like they're afraid of growing up. Afraid of what it means to be a real adult, with all the hard parts.
You got it. It's like a fear of owning their life, really stepping into their power.
So what happens if someone stays stuck like this? What's the downside of never really becoming an adult, psychologically?
Well, personally, it can be a pretty empty life. You feel lost, like you're not going anywhere. And relationships are tough because you're not good at the whole intimacy and commitment thing. But it goes beyond just the individual, This pattern, it affects society as a whole.
Well, that's kind of scary. How so?
Well, imagine what happens when a lot of people don't want responsibility, they don't commit to things, and they only care about what feels good right now, what happens to society.
Doesn't sound good.
It's not. things start to break down. Nobody cares about the community, things fall apart, and it gets really easy to manipulate people who never learn to think for themselves.
Yikes. So you're saying this eternal child thing, it could actually be making us worse as a society. Less caring, less responsible.
Well, it's a possibility we gotta consider. When people are stuck in that adolescent mindset, they're not thinking about the bigger picture. They're not invested in the well-being of everyone else. It's like a collective Peter Pan syndrome, you know? Nobody wants to grow up and face reality. And Jung himself, he was worried about this. He saw this trend towards immaturity as a real danger, something that could undermine everything.
This is getting pretty bleak. Is there any hope for these guys, these eternal children? Can they ever break out of it and become real adults?
Of course there's hope, but it takes work. You gotta be willing to face those parts of yourself you've been hiding from and make a choice to change. It's about building personal power, not like being a dictator, but more like being the captain of your own ship.
Okay, I like that analogy. But how do you actually do that? What are some things people can do to break free and reach their full potential?
First, you gotta see the problem. Admitting you might be stuck in this pattern is the hardest part. But once you do, you can start making different choices, little by little. Set some goals, learn something new, push yourself outside your comfort zone. And maybe the most important thing, find some role models. People who are living the way you want to live.
Surround yourself with good examples makes sense.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's not just about individual effort, right? We need a change in our culture too.
Absolutely. We have to start valuing things like maturity and responsibility again. We got to create a culture that encourages men to be their best selves, not just for themselves, but for everyone else too.
It's a powerful message. So what can our listeners do to help make that happen, both in their own lives and in the world around them?
Well, for starters, just talking about this stuff helps. Challenge the idea that it's cool to be immature and irresponsible. Support things that promote responsible manhood. And on a personal level, and just being more aware of the choices you're making. Like, are you really acting like a grown-up, or are you just holding on to that easy, comfortable way of being?
It sounds like that awareness, seeing those patterns in ourselves and others, that's the first step to actually dealing with this.
Exactly. And Jung talked about another layer to all this idea of psychological inflation and deflation.
Ooh, okay, those sound pretty intense. What's that all about?
Think of a balloon, right? Psychological inflation is like blowing that balloon up way too big. It's when someone's ego gets out of control. They think they're way more important or powerful than they really are. Happens a lot with people in charge, you know?
So the whole power going to their head thing.
Yeah, but it's deeper than just being arrogant. They lose touch with reality. And here's the thing Jung said, when this happens with the people at the top, it often goes along with the opposite happening to everyone else.
Psychological deflation, you mean? What does that look like?
Like sucking all the air out of that balloon, you know? It shrivels up, becomes powerless. It's this feeling of being helpless, like you don't matter and your voice doesn't count. Happens when people feel like they've got no control over their own lives.
Makes sense, especially these days when so many folks feel like they're not being heard, like the system is rigged against them.
Exactly. And here's the dangerous part. These two things, inflation and deflation, they feed each other. It's a vicious cycle. The people in power, they're all puffed up and they project their own crap onto everyone else, making them feel even worse, even more powerless.
Hold on. Project their own crap.
Oh, right. Jung talked about the shadow. It's like the hidden part of your personality, all the stuff you don't want to admit to, the bad stuff.
So these powerful people, they're putting their own darkness onto everyone else.
Basically. They blame everyone else for problems, say people are lazy or stupid, whatever. It's a way to stay on top by keeping everyone else down.
So messed up. But it makes sense, sadly. What happens if this keeps going on? What's the end game here?
Jung thought this whole inflation-deflation thing was how dictatorships get started. When people feel totally powerless, they'll follow anyone who promises to fix things, even if that person is a total tyrant.
It's like we've seen that happen over and over again, right? People turn to these strongmen when they're scared and things are falling apart.
Yep. And we got to be super careful about that now, because there's a lot of disillusionment out there. People don't trust institutions anymore. They're looking for answers.
So, what can we do about it? How do we break this cycle, both individually and as a society?
Jung said it comes down to individuation. It's about becoming a whole person, not just following the crowd. You got to face your own shadow, figure out what makes you you, and take charge of your own life.
Sounds like a lot of work, especially when everything pushes us to just fit in and obey. How do you even start doing that?
Start by questioning everything. Question authority, question what you think you know, question what the media and politicians are telling you. You gotta think critically, learn to see through the BS, and trust your own gut.
So, becoming smarter about the information we take in, basically. Less likely to get manipulated.
Exactly. And don't wait for someone else to fix things for you. Take responsibility for your own life. Learn some skills, set some goals, actually do something to create the life you want instead of just accepting whatever's handed to you.
Taking back our power as individuals and as a community. But how do we do that when it feels like so much is out of our control?
We have more power than we think. Every choice we make, every action we take, it has ripples, even if they're small. Stop feeling like a victim. Start acting like you can actually make a difference.
So focus on what we can change, not what we can't.
Right. And real change, it usually starts small. People get together, challenge the way things are, and try to build something better.
Kind of like what you were saying before about role models,
Yeah.
right? Find people who are a lot of the way you want to live.
Exactly. See how they do it, get inspired by them. It's proof that things can be different, that we're not alone in wanting a better world.
So it's about keeping hope alive, believing that we can actually make things better.
For sure. And humor is important too. Jung said humor can be like a weapon against tyranny. It makes fun of powerful people. It shows how ridiculous and messed up things are.
Laughter is a form of resistance. Interesting.
It is. It helps you see things in a new way. It helps you break free from fear and all that. It reminds you that you're not just a cog in the machine. You can choose to be joyful. You can choose to fight back, even when things suck.
That's pretty powerful. It's like even when things are dark, we can choose hope. We can choose laughter. We can choose to fight for something better.
Exactly. And in those moments when you make that choice, that's when you step into your own power. That's when you finally leave that childish stuff behind and become who you're meant to be.
This has been an incredible conversation. Seriously, I feel like I've learned so much about this whole man-child thing and how it affects us all.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this journey, this becoming a whole person, it takes a lifetime. It's not easy, you'll mess up, but the more you pay attention to these patterns and try to break free, the better things will get for you and for everyone else.
Yeah, really makes you think.
It does. And realizing these things is the first step to actually changing them, both for ourselves and for the world around us.
So true. What can our listeners do to actually start living this more mature, responsible way.
It might sound basic, but building that self-reliance is huge.
Like, what does that look like in real life?
Learning to do things for yourself, setting goals, and then the key is working to reach them. Even just getting physically stronger can make a difference. All these things, they might seem small, but they add up. They make you feel more capable, like you're in control.
Taking charge, not waiting around for someone else to do it for you.
Exactly. And finding good role models, that's important too. People who embody that mature, strong way of being that you admire. Being around folks like that, it rubs off on you, helps you grow.
Yeah, find people who've walked the walk and learn from them.
Exactly. And on a bigger level, we gotta talk about this stuff more openly. Call out the media and pop culture when they make being immature and irresponsible seem cool.
It's about changing our values
Right.
as a whole society, realizing that real strength comes from maturity, from caring about others, from being part of something bigger than yourself.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And this isn't just a men's issue either. This is about making a better world for everyone.
Absolutely. This has been an incredible conversation. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on what it means to be a man in today's world.
Glad to hear it. And remember, this is a lifelong thing. Becoming a better, more whole person. You'll screw up along the way. It's not a straight line. But keep trying to grow. Keep paying attention to yourself and how you act. That's the key.
Great advice. Anything else you want to leave our listeners with?
Just this. Never stop questioning. Never stop pushing yourself. And never ever give up on becoming the best version of yourself.
Love that. And for our listeners who want to dig deeper into this stuff, I'd recommend checking out the song Corner by Sasquatch.
Good one. It really makes you think about some of the things we've been talking about today.
Until next time, everyone, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep growing.